for a while just to see if history died down. It didn't happen. And it's not worth the skiing on the triple only. You know, you're so limited in the terrain. But the conditions up there were some of the best that I've ever seen. Because of the rain, they had to groom the entire mountain. So even the bump trails were flat. And we'd never speed them like that because it's all natural snow. You can get going pretty fast on it. So, but I don't know who they have running it up there, but I'd been a season pass holder for 10 years probably. Do you think I got an email when they were going to reopen the mountain? Nobody did. Ed Farrington lives up there, and he had to find out from someplace else that they were open.
I saw Ed Farrington today, and he was complaining about that too. Like, no, I mean, you know, there's a couple of ads in the Boston Globe. I think we've done it.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, or even
or get a website.
Right, or do the ski report. I guess they're not even submitting ski reports. Usually in the morning they'll say, you know, Gunstock 100% open.
Right.
USB Wildcat, Cannon.
If it's MUR, then you have to pay for that service.
Oh.
And I think the last owner didn't pay the bill.
I'm not sure how much it could be though, just to, you know, they say 1 second,
Right.
like so-and-so open. 8 months open.
It's like a big secret. I'm good. Not much. How you doing, Tim?
Back on the board now.
Scoreboard.
Take that with you.
High school.
Yeah.
So didn't have not out of your system yet. Being liquor guy, I had to get back involved. Jump back in the pool. Only the school.
Right.
Famous last one.
Yeah.
Oh, my school board.
The hour of 7 p.m. has arrived. I will open the 2008 annual town meeting for the town of Plymouth. And while people are still checking in, we will start. I will provide you with some information about the results from the ballots yesterday. The official ballot for the town of Plymouth. For Selectman, Darrell Brown, 470. Wallace Butch Cushing, the third, 307 votes. John Randlett, 231. And last night we elected Darrell Brown and Butch Cushing for terms on the select board. For moderator, Quentin Blaine, 597 votes. For supervisor of the checklist, that was a write-in. Mary Nelson received 100 votes. Dick Piper received several votes, and I declared that Mary Nelson was the winner of the supervisor of the checklist election. For treasurer, Carol Garrity, 545 votes. And with each of these, there were a few scattered write-ins, but I don't have all of that information. For cemetery trustee, Ted Garrity, 552 votes. Trustee of the trust funds, no one was running. That was another write-in. They were all too scattered, and I did not declare a winner on that election, so that's open to be appointed, I believe. For library trustee, S. Tyler Durham, 172 votes. G. Douglas Grant, 294 votes. Gay Zimmerman, 342 votes. And that was a vote for two, so G. Douglas Grant and Gay Zimmerman were elected as library trustees. On Article 2, shall we adopt the provisions of RSA 4013 to allow official ballot voting on all issues before the town? There were 309 yes, 239 no. That is less than 60%, so that article failed. On the Plymouth School District election, For moderator, Quentin Blaine, 594 votes. School district treasurer, Susan Jane Clay, 581 votes. For school district clerk, Susan Jane Clay, 576 votes. For school board member, Kathleen Wood Hedberg, 431 votes. Antonia Orlando, 315 votes. Linda G. Reisert, 243 votes. John H. Randlett, 140 votes. That was, 2 were elected, and so Kathleen Hedberg and Antonia Orlando won that election and will be on the Plymouth School Board. For the vote on RSA SB2, the same language as for the town, but I don't have it with me. That was the blue ballot for anyone who voted yesterday. We had a total of 271 noes, 340 yeses. That is less than 60%, and so that article failed. And just for information purpose, that particular question did not reach any absentee voters. And so I did the calculations as if every absentee voter had voted yes, and the article still failed with less than 57%. On the Pemmy-Baker Regional School District elections, these are the numbers. I'm just looking at them now, besides a slew of write-ins. For Campton, 3-year term, Peter Pettengill, 1,868. Campton, 2-year term, Susan Johnston as a write-in with 28 votes. Holderness, Ross Deachman, 1,765 votes. Plymouth, on the Pemmy-Baker School Board, Kathy Ringline, 1,751 votes. Plymouth for a 2-year term, Tim Narrow, 1,005 votes. Bill Daw, 763 votes. For Rumney, Ed Gyro, 1,612 votes. For moderator, Quentin Blaine, 2,084 votes. And this is the first that I've seen this, so I would declare that Peter Pettengill won the Campton 3-year seat. Susan Johnston is the winner for the Campton 2-year seat. Ross Deachman was the winner for the Holderness seat. Kathy Ringline for the Plymouth 3-year seat. Tim Narrow for the Plymouth 2-year seat. Ed Gyro for the Rumney seat. And Quentin Blaine for moderator. If you join me in with the Pledge of Allegiance, we have a flag on the wall over to my right. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I noticed you have a problem with cadence as well.
Before we get the meeting officially going, I'd like to recognize Butch Cushing.
Good evening. I'd like to take this opportunity to recognize one of the outgoing selectmen, John Ramlett. John stepped into a very difficult situation when one of our serving selectmen, Jody Dickerson, moved to another town, so he had to step down from his seat. So we, John, who had run in the election and finished just a few votes behind John Kelly, we had asked John if he would step on board for the last 8 to 9 months. John did an extremely good job at this. We had the opportunity to sit on several budget committees and stuff, so he was able to pick things up very quickly and became a tremendous asset, even in the short time that he was with us. His skills, some of the skills that he brought to the table really helped us in a lot of the things that we were able to accomplish. So at this time, John, I'd like to have you step up. I'll read the plaque presented to John Ranlett in recognition of your service to the town of Plymouth while serving as selectman August 2007 to March 2008, presented by the Board of Selectmen at town meeting March 12th, 2008. Thank you, John.
Recognize Patrice Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just wanted to point out to the Assembly that we have a correction to make on our annual report on page 12. There's a reference to our very dedicated town employee at the recycling center, Kevin Danforth. At the time this report was printed, Kevin was facing a very strenuous battle against leukemia, and unfortunately he lost the battle in February. So in honor of his wishes, he was a very private person, did not wish to have a moment of silence or public recognition. We just wanted to point this out and say that how much we truly appreciated Kevin's dedication, his hard work for the town, and just the great human being he was. And there will be a ceremony held in the spring for him.
We'll start with the deliberative part of the meeting. First thing, a couple of house cleaning pieces. If the ubiquitous cell phone is at your side or in your purse, please put it on silent or vibrate or something so that it, and please don't answer it during the meeting inside. If you if you're a citizen and you have not registered to vote, please do so. Everybody who's eligible to vote should have a red card. We do have some guests tonight. I know there's some guests from the high school and some guests from Plymouth State University as well, and so I welcome you. I'd also like to know, with a show of hands, all those who are not residents and not registered here to vote tonight. Okay, thank you. If you're speaking, please come to the microphone at the front. Please give your name each time that you speak. Also, for the rules that I intend to follow, you can find them starting on page 94, just before the warrant in the book. And remember, all questions should go through the moderator. So we'll start the deliberative session, which is Article 3, to elect one member of the Advisory Budget Committee for a 4-year term and one member for a 2-year term. Are there nominations? Hearing no nominations, we won't be electing anybody. We will move on to Article 2. I trust the board appoints after this. Okay. Article 4, rather. Thank you. Article 4, to see if the town will vote to approve the following resolution to be forwarded to our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor. Resolved, we, the citizens of Plymouth, New Hampshire, believe in a New Hampshire that is just and fair. The property tax has become unjust and unfair. State leaders who take a pledge for no new taxes perpetuate higher and higher property taxes. We call on our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor to reject the pledge, have an open discussion covering all options, and adopt a revenue system that lowers property taxes. Is there a motion? Been moved. Is there a second?
Mr. Moderator, I move the article as read, Article 4.
I thought I actually heard you too. Is there a second? The article's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Kathleen?
I'm Catherine Hillier, and I'm one of the 30 or 40 people that signed the petition which put this particular resolution on the ballot, on the warrant rather. And I'd like to share with you why I think this resolution should pass. 2 reasons that I am most concerned about. The first is that over the years, I think the property tax has become an unfair tax. As everyone here knows, that's the most widely paid tax in New Hampshire. While there are some 24 other taxes, the bulk of the funds raised in this state come from the property tax. And at the local level, that is the tax that pays most of the freight. That's the tax that covers expenditures for the county, for most of the towns, and pays for most of the schooling in our local towns. The unfairness of the situation comes in when you look at the household incomes of people in various categories. For instance, those who are in the lower 20 or 40% of income households in New Hampshire pay a much higher percentage of that income for their property tax than do those at the upper level. What this means is that every time more funds are added onto that property tax, an even bigger bite is coming out of households that are having a hard time trying to scramble to find the money. So in a situation, for instance, where you have someone who's retired living on a fixed income and taxes go up 6 or 7% a year, as they have on the average in New Hampshire over the last few years, that's a very hefty piece of change to find on a very limited income to begin with. And the same would be true of those who have lower or moderate incomes compared to those at the upper levels, because generally their wage increases aren't keeping up with the rise of the property tax, or at least often that's the case. So that puts us in a situation where the biggest burden of taxation through the property tax falls on those who are least able to pay. So there's one of the pieces that makes me want to reopen this situation and take a new look. The other is this. When our elected officials take a pledge, the famous pledge, in effect what they're doing is shutting off debate on the issue. What really happens in that situation is that it's not possible for us then to have an open and clear dialogue about the taxation situation in New Hampshire, to try to find a solution that works for those who are paying the unfairest part of the burden. I have spent much of my life in a profession which is based on trying to get information in people's hands, trying to find the information they need. And another large piece of the work we do is trying to provide opportunities for people to come together to discuss issues, to share ideas. So to have ourselves in a situation where our elected officials are asked to sign a pledge that in effect shuts off debate on an issue that's absolutely fundamental to our lives just doesn't sit very well with me. So I hope that you here tonight will join me in voting yes for this resolution and in trying to open the dialogue on a really important situation here in this state. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? John.
I guess I believe in the spirit of this, but to use the pledge in there, the pledge, and Kathy said something about signing a pledge. Does anyone sign that pledge? It's not a formal thing at all. It's if your representatives or someone says they're going to take a pledge not to raise taxes, you don't have to vote for them. I'm not sure. I think I would support this amendment if we left reject the pledge out. The pledge is not a formal thing. It's nothing anyone signs. It's just someone takes if they want to get elected, I guess. So I guess I would ask to amend this to just say we call on our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor to have an open discussion covering all options and adopt the revenue system that lowers property taxes. I'd like to propose that amendment.
If I understand your amendment, it would take out the words reject the pledge.
Correct.
And the rest would stay.
Right.
There's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any discussion on the amendment? No, I want to vote on one at a time. That's all I can handle. Discussion on this amendment. Mr. Ahern.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My name is Omer Ahern Jr. I'm from up on Cummings Hill Road, and With regard to the amendment, I had prepared and submitted a written amendment, copies of which were on the table on the way in, and I've handed out a few copies. Folks, what this Article number 4 is about as
Mr.
presented.
Ahern, are you speaking to the amendment itself?
No, I'm speaking to the
Okay.
article.
Well, let's speak to the amendment right now. It's only the amendment that's on the floor. So I'll give you a moment and then let you speak to the article. But if there's anyone that wants to speak to the amendment itself, I'll call on you next.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Janet Moorhead, I'm in favor of this removing the wording about the pledge because I don't think it is the job of the legislative body of this town to micromanage people's campaigns. That is part of their campaign platform, what they're going to do. And, you know, if we start micromanaging on this particular issue, what's next? So stay out of how people run their own campaigns.
Is there any further discussion on the amendment? We'll bring it to a vote, and the vote in this a vote on the amendment is to remove the words "reject the pledge" from Article 4, the resolution in Article 4, so that that sentence, we call on our state representatives, our state senator, our governor to have an open discussion covering all options and adopt a revenue system that lowers property taxes. This is a vote only on the amendment. Is that clear? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed to the amendment? I think we're going to need to count this. Maybe if we did at the same time. Looking for my card. Maybe that would help me. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your card. Oh, this is going to probably call a count anyway. All those opposed? Yeah, I think we need to count. Can I get a couple of ballot clerks? Neil, would you count this section right here? Okay, everyone's cards down. I need to have a couple of other counters. Mr. Ahern, would you count that section there? I need somebody to count the back section. Officer, are you a citizen, resident? You're not in Plymouth, okay. Is there a Plymouth resident back on that section? Would you count the back? Karen, you count that side? Mr. Cushing, would you count everybody in the front row? Okay, everybody in, Mr. Cushing, you got the front row? Yes, okay. Everybody in favor of the amendment, please raise your card. All counted? Okay, you can put your card down, Mr. Ahern.
22.
What's that?
22.
22. Karen. Mr. Cushing. Marcia? How many? 3? Okay. Those are all my counters, right? Okay, those who oppose the amendment, please raise your card. We're all counted?
19.
19? 16. Karen? Mr. Cushing? What's that?
I didn't get
Oh.
these people in, so add 1 to each of my counts.
Okay. I got Mr. Cushing and Marcia? 11. "44 ayes, 52 nays. The amendment fails. So we're back to the main article. Mr. Ahern.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Again, my name is Omar Ahern Jr. from Cummings Hill Road. Mr. Moderator, I would offer an amendment to warrant article number 4. Resolved, we the citizens of Plymouth, New Hampshire, believe in a New Hampshire that is just and fair. The property tax has become unjust and unfair. State leaders who have increased state spending 17% in the last state budget perpetuate higher and higher property taxes. We call on our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor to reduce the irresponsible spending in Concord, which will lower the property tax burden for the residents of New Hampshire. That's my motion, Mr. Moderator.
Is there a second? There's moved and seconded. The amendment is on the floor. Is there anyone to speak to the amendment? Mr. Ahern.
Point of order. The essence of this is to remove what's printed in the book and replace it with this.
That would be the amendment, yes.
Right. The amendment replaces.
Would replace the resolution, or at least a portion of it. The first two sentences would stay the same. I think the intent is still about the tax.
I do not understand where this amendment starts.
The underlying part, Mr. Moderator.
That the first two sentences remain the same.
Right.
All right, thank you. I got it. I understand.
Thank you. Mr. Moderator, may I proceed?
Yes, please.
Mr. Moderator, what this amendment is about instituting an income tax in New Hampshire. The folks that are behind this, the original folks behind this article, the folks that put it together, one of their officers is, the treasurer of that organization is Mark Fernald, former candidate for governor who ran on the imposing a income tax in New Hampshire. Folks, our problem in New Hampshire is government spending. And our property tax is still going to be there. If we institute an income tax in New Hampshire, we're still going to have a property tax to pay our local and county taxes. In those states that have instituted an income tax that already have a property tax, the property taxes have not gone down, and in fact, their tax burden overall has increased. Right now, New Hampshire, in all the 50 states, we have the second lowest overall tax burden in the country. The state of Alaska has a lower tax burden overall of all the 50 states, and that's because they have some oil revenue. But New Hampshire, even with our high property taxes, and we all feel them, but if we put forward the article as presented and not as amended, we're opening up the floodgates for an income tax. And again, if we have an income tax, we're still going to have a property tax, and our overall tax burden is just going to keep going up and up and up. Spending is the problem. In our present state budget, they instituted a 17% increase, and that's why we have a $50 million deficit, which is probably going to be closer to a $150 million deficit. I would have to respectfully disagree that the pledge, taking the pledge of people running for office does not shut off the debate on other sources of revenue, which is another way of saying taxes and raising money. I believe that we need to send a message to Concord, to our representatives in Concord, the people that put together the state budget, reduce spending. And that will keep our taxes, our property taxes, better controlled. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, We'll vote on the amendment, and I will read it. The amendment, I'll read the resolution in full since it does include the first two sentences, but the resolution, the proposed amendment to the resolution would have it read as follows. Resolved, we the citizens of Plymouth, New Hampshire, believe in a New Hampshire that is just and fair. The property tax has become unjust and unfair. State leaders who have increased state spending 17% in the last state budget perpetuate higher property taxes. We call on our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor to reduce the irresponsible spending in Concord, which will lower the property tax burden for the residents of New Hampshire. We are voting on this amendment. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? No. The amendment fails, which brings us back to the main motion. Is there further discussion on the main motion? Mr. Ahearn.
Just a couple things. I'm opposed to this warrant article. By the way, Henry Ahern, resident of Plymouth, Lower Innival. Couple of things. First of all, as been stated, taking the pledge is nothing more than a politician's promise not to go for an income tax or a sales tax. That's the politician's choice to make that pledge. Forcing people not to take the pledge is a non-issue. Nobody signs anything. There's no governing body that's sitting over them other than the voters in the state of New Hampshire. So it really should be a non-issue. Income taxes will not lower your property taxes, and that is what this article is about, is getting a broad-based tax in the state of New Hampshire. It's not going to affect your property taxes. Your property taxes are what is raised at this meeting. You want to affect your property taxes, you come to your town meeting and you vote no on spending money. That's how you lower your property taxes. Putting an income tax in the state isn't going to change what happens at this meeting. The other big thing that does affect us in our property taxes is mandates from the state that we have to do something. So there's the other issue. Don't worry about the taxes. Get the state to stop mandating programs on the town. That will also lower your property taxes because the town has to pay for those mandates. And as stated, other states gone for an income tax, put them in, their property taxes do not go down. Putting in a broad-based tax is not going to lower your property tax. So again, I'm opposed to this article, first because it's a non-issue, second because taxes are not going to help us in the town of Plymouth. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Yes. Mr. Wood.
Seeing this body is just about divided equally, I would say let's pass over this, because no matter whether we vote yes or no, you're not going to get a true representation of this body, whether we want it or don't want it, which will really confuse our representatives in Concord. They're confused already, but this will really put the kibosh to them.
Point of information, Mr. Moderator?
Yes.
I'm wondering if we could, from the supervisors of the checklist, get a gauge on how many people are here this evening, just so when we vote either way, we'll have a count of how many registered voters are here. Thank you.
I think that's out of order. We actually have a motion made to pass over. Is there a second to the motion? There's a second to that motion? If there's a second, could you raise your hand? I wasn't sure if I heard it. Okay, Mrs. Moorhead made the second. We have a motion to pass over. I believe that is not debatable. I believe that will require us to have a 2/3 majority vote to pass over this particular article. All those in favor of passing over the article, say aye. Opposed? No. The motion fails. Yes? We have been asked to move the question. Is there a second? Just want to make sure I get it correct. That also, to move the question, is not debatable. It requires 2/3. All those in favor of moving the question, which means that we will bring it up to a vote, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? The question has been moved, which brings us to the article as written. Article 4. To see if the...
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. Moderator?
What's, pardon?
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr.
Yes.
Moderator? Can we have the vote by red card here, Mr. Moderator?
I don't need a red card in that particular vote because the voices were overwhelming.
But on the vote on the main motion?
The vote on the main motion, we certainly can. You want it to be counted?
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
We can do that. I'll have the same people count. Mr. Ahern, Henry, you'll count that section over there. We'll have the same counters. So it brings us to Article 4, to see if the town will vote to approve the following resolution to be forwarded to our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor. Resolved, we the citizens of Plymouth, New Hampshire, believe in a New Hampshire that is just and fair. The property taxes become unjust and unfair. State leaders who take a pledge for no new taxes perpetuate higher and higher property taxes. We call on our state representatives, our state senator, and our governor to reject the pledge. Have an open discussion covering all options, and adopt a revenue system that lowers property taxes. Would the counters please stand? All those in favor of the motion, please raise your red card and keep it up until we've finished counting. Nothing to count. Marcia. All those opposed to the motion, please raise the red card. Keep it in the air until it's been counted.
Somebody counting in the front over there?
Yes, Mr. Cushing. 11, 2, Marcia, 4. The motion passes 62 to 34. And I declare that. Pardon? Which brings us to Article 5, to see if the town will vote to amend the surviving spouse of veterans tax credit as prescribed by RSA 72:29A from $700 to $2,000. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I would like to move to Article number 5.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on Article number 5? Mr. Ahern.
I would like to go back to Patrice's request to get count from the checklist.
Sure, if the supervisors of the checklist can provide us with the number of voters, that would... Thank you. Okay, discussions on Article 5. Mr. Wood.
This is just a question. What does a veteran who is married get for a tax rebate? This is just for the spouse, right?
Correct. A surviving spouse.
Yeah, if the veteran dies, the wife gets X number.
We may have an answer to the question behind. Do you have an...
Can I answer that, John?
Would you relinquish the mic maybe to have that question answered? Is that what's going to happen?
Yes, I'll answer that.
John, would that be fine?
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. Sure. Identify yourself, please.
Mark Brzezinski. And to answer your question, John, this pertains to somebody whose spouse was killed or died while in action. And I'd like to speak in support of this, obviously, because I'm Doug DeCenzo's stepfather. And this is something that means something to me and to my family. My daughter-in-law has chosen to locate here after Doug was killed in Iraq. And for her, this is something that would be meaningful over the course of the years. And she chose to locate here because the Plymouth provides the kind of support that she saw for Doug and she would like to have for her family here. And it's just one more way that we can support those people who are left behind when somebody gives their life for our country. Other towns in the area have adopted this. Plymouth just hasn't chose to do it, I assume, because it hasn't been important. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Yes, Doug. Would you please use the microphone?
That isn't what I asked. He didn't ask that question.
Okay.
He asked what was the amount of money that a veteran gets now for a deduction.
John Wood has the microphone. I was trying to catch your eye, John, but you were talking, so.
Well, I was asking him if.
Okay.
and
You have a
he said-
question? Is there somebody who has the answer?
If you're a regular veteran in a family, you don't get $2,000 now, do you? You only get around 500? 250. Well, I would personally like to make a motion to make it 2,000. If you're a veteran with a family, you get 2,000. If you're deceased, you can't do it? $500 tops. But we're not at 500 yet. Okay, so I could say in a motion that the average veteran with a family would go from, what'd you say, 250 to 500, and then this would also go to 2,000. So we'll kill two birds with one stone. Bad word.
Is that the same statute that he's talking about?
Mr. Moderator?
I think that we may have a change of intent there, John. I may not allow that amendment.
Mr. Moderator, I would just ask that we recognize Kate Bysiegel, who is our land records supervisor, who is very knowledgeable about the veterans' benefits that are currently on record with the town, so that everybody could hear her. I'm not sure, because she wasn't at a microphone, whether everyone could hear her.
If you'd like to step to the microphone, Kate, would appreciate that. If you want to go ahead and comply with the selectman's request.
All right, no, wait a minute, you're taller than I am.
Okay, what am I answering?
So I think the question, John, do you want to reiterate your question, please?
What I want to know is, under this article, can we give a veteran and his family $500 instead of $250?
Not under this article, that has to be a separate one.
And can they vote before the increase?
No. We're only here for these warrant articles that are here.
Right, I think we would have to be warned if it's a different statute. I would rule that motion out of order if it's a different statute.
It is.
And I don't.
Yes.
Well, how do we bring it, if you want to do it, how do we bring it before this?
It would have to be on next year's warrant.
Yes. You'd have to petition, bring it next year.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Okay.
John, did your first question get answered?
Yeah.
Okay.
We can't give the veterans any extra money, which is wrong.
Thank you.
Douglas Grant. My question is, I heard it described as a surviving spouse of a veteran killed in action.
That's what I heard.
But the warrant article says surviving spouse of a veteran. It says nothing about killed in action. So wouldn't this cover any veteran spouse? Where does the killed in action part get into the article?
Well, if you'd like to speak, Kate, if you'd go to the, there is a copy of the statute around. I don't have it up here. Is there further discussion? John?
So what was the answer to that question?
Good question.
I eat too much for dinner anyway, so exercise is good for me.
If you'd like me to read that statute, John, it says the 7229A says the surviving spouse of any person who was killed or died while on active duty in the armed forces of the United States or any of the armed forces of any of the governments associated with the United States in the wars, conflict, or armed conflicts or combat zones as set forth in RSA 7220:28 shall receive a tax credit in the amount of $700 for the taxes due upon the surviving spouse's real and personal property, whether residential or not, in the same municipality where the surviving spouse is a resident. 2, on the adoption of this paragraph by a city or town as provided in RSA 72:27A, the surviving spouse of any person who was killed or died while on active duty in the armed forces of the United States or of any of the armed forces of any of the governments associated with the United States in the wars, conflict, or armed conflicts or combat zones set forth in RSA 72:28 shall receive a tax credit in the amount of from $701 up to $2,000 for the taxes due upon the surviving spouse's real and personal property, whether residential or not, in the same municipality where the surviving spouse is a resident. That probably answers several underlying questions, I'm not sure. But does that answer yours, John?
Did you say 27 or 29?
What's that? It's not the article, it's 72:29-A. Well, there is inside it, it talks about some other RSAs, and one of them is 72:27, but that's this article.
So we have previously adopted this RSA, the town, and this is just to raise it?
I do not know. The
Mr.
answer,
Moderator,
yes.
that is correct, John. There is a petition warrant article which was necessary to raise the
Okay,
limit.
but it's already been adopted by a previous town meeting.
It's actually a standard in state statutes. The $700 is standard that you give to
Oh, okay, so we didn't have to adopt it, it's all right.
It's a statute.
You have to adopt to raise it.
The answer to that was we didn't have to adopt the $700. That's a standard. If it's to go above the $700, then we would need this particular article on the warrant. Mr. Ahern.
It's kind of hard for me because I'm a veteran, but I'm curious as to how many other, if anybody has any idea how many other towns are at the $2,000 level, which seems to be the maximum. And one of my concerns is if we end up as the only town that is at the $2,000 level and your taxes on your house are $3,000, will we end up with a big influx of people moving to Plymouth because of this tax? And so I think the 700, I think benefits for veterans is very important, but it's just a curiosity.
Is there anyone who has an answer to that question at the front table? No. Yes.
Two answers. One is, I've always thought of Plymouth as a leadership town in New Hampshire. So if we're the only one, I'm willing to take the lead. And maybe I can talk to Mr. Ahern, because I think his proposal, or his concept is sort of an economic development idea, and I'm in that business, and I need to talk to him about it. So thank you.
Is there other further debate? I move the question. The question's been moved. Is there a second? All those in favor of voting on this article say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Which brings us to the question. And the question, Article 5, to see if the town will vote to amend the surviving spouse of a veteran tax credit as prescribed by RSA 72:29A from $700 to $2,000. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Article 5 passes. Article 6, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $283,452 for fiscal year 2008-2009 to pay off a note relating to the Green Street parking lot, said funds to come from the unreserved fund balance. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I move the question.
Move the question or move the article?
Move the article.
Is there a second? And it's been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Wood, would you please go to the microphone? Okay, folks, hey, ladies and gentlemen, let's make sure we enjoy ourselves, but have respect too. John.
How much money has been collected so far from that parking lot?
Is there? Is that information available? How much money has been collected from the parking lot?
We're talking about fees, John. John, we're talking about revenue from the parking lot. I believe it's around $300.
Is there further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the question. And the question is Article 6, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $283,452 for FY 08-09 to pay off a note relating to the Green Street parking lot, said funds to come from the unreserved fund balance. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. The article passes. Article 7, to see if the town will vote to grant authority to the Board of Selectmen allowed under RSA 41:14-A to acquire or sell land, building, or both, provided, however, that they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the Planning Board and the Conservation Commission for review and recommendation, following which the Selectmen shall conduct 2 public hearings on any proposed acquisition or sale. This authority to sell property shall not apply to town-owned conservation land, town forest land, or real estate given to the town for charitable or community purposes. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I would like to move Article 7.
Article 7's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Mrs. Moorhead.
I'd like to know, is this cover like property that we take from tax sale? As I notice in our town report that there are 4 separate properties that we've acquired through taxes, like the junkyard and such. Would those types of things have to come before a public hearing before the town decides whether to take a property for taxes?
Janet, was it to take it for taxes or to sell it?
To take it.
To take it, okay. Is there an answer? You want to make that answer?
Janet, that's a different RSA.
Is there further discussion? We'll vote on Article 7. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just Tyler Durham is my name. And I was just curious if it does not apply to town-owned conservation land, town forest land, or real estate given to the town for charitable or community purposes, what does it apply to?
Who? Mr. Cushing.
A taxable property that, or property that we bought, or taxable property that we already have.
Do you have an example?
Plymouth, where the old Plymouth Inn was, would be an example.
Okay.
That's across from the movie theater.
Okay. Right. Thank you.
Yes.
My name is Maureen Ebner. Mr. Moderator, I'd like some clarification because I don't really understand the article. I'd like to know if the Select Board is at this time able to buy and sell land on behalf of the town of Plymouth without a public hearing.
Is there an answer for that? Which? Or, well.
You have to have two public hearings within 7 days of each other.
As it stands now?
Yes.
What is the reason then for this article? I don't understand the difference.
It just pertains to properties that we already own, if the town has an opportunity to sell them in the future. Kelly's Salvage, something like that. The town owns Kelly's Salvage. The town owns a piece of property across from the movie theater.
Right.
If an opportunity came up for the town to be able to sell those properties, this warrant article would allow them to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Mr. Leo. Bill, before you get there, I think I recognize Mr. Leo first. Thank you.
Judy DeLeo. I want to just continue with where Maureen Ebner left off, because it says to acquire or sell. And Mr. Freitas's description was just to sell. So I'm not sure, again, what's...
Can we use the microphone?
Mr. Moderator, could I clarify? I
Sure.
think I may be able to clarify this for Mrs. Ebner also. Judy, this article is just, we were advised by DRA to bring it up again. It's been passed in the past, but it hasn't been done for several years, and the statute actually changed to make it so that we wouldn't have to pass this article again, and it would be up to the town assembly whether they wanted us to have that indefinite power far into the future. We could add some words to this. The board decided simply to bring it up because it hasn't been on at town meeting for a few years, and we have acquired through tax deed and railroad acquisition, this buying of little pieces of land. We wanted to be able to let the town assembly know that we do have that authority if it's granted. It's been granted in the past. We're simply doing it again so that you're aware that we have this authority, and we could do it until revoked into the future if somebody wanted to amend that. But we wanted to let the people decide what they wanted to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Houle.
Patrice just made the clarification that I was going to make.
Thank you. Mr. Reels.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Bob Reels, Merrill Street. I'm just surprised to not see who was sponsoring this, and if it was sponsored by the select board, if it was unanimously sponsored.
Patrice? Or Butch, I'm sorry, who's on?
Yes, it was.
Okay, so it's just a typo that it didn't get under there? It doesn't say the Board of Selectmen recommends passage of this?
Yeah, there's no money involved in it, so we don't...
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Ms. Orlando.
So we have one more question from the back row. Can the town then be held accountable if we sell a piece of property that has environmental concerns? Could we get into a big
There's
mess?
procedures to go through, and if you can get clearance and all the proper environmental clearances and everything, and you in full disclosure of the property, you can sell.
Mr. Tucker. John. Mr. Park, okay. I won't do that.
I assume acquire does not mean buy. Is that correct?
Is that an answer to the...
It does mean buy as far as I understand. Mr. Tucker, or Mr. Moderator, may I just say,
Sure.
If you're asking John, I would say maybe after all this discussion, people are wondering, are we intending to buy or sell property? The answer is no. This is really a housekeeping article that was brought up because we were recommended by DRA to do that. So we have no plans to buy or sell anything, but there are a number of properties that we've found on our hands, and so we wanted to bring this up again in case we need to exercise that.
Okay, I understand that, and I understand that there are times when people donate land or so forth to the town. The opposite of sell, though, is buy, and I think for clarification, buy should have be mentioned there, but I think as long as we understand acquire does also mean you could buy it. That's all right with me.
Allison.
Does this article allow us to lease out land? Does this article allow us to lease out land, like to be landlords?
Is there an answer from the front?
I'm going to say I don't think so, but I'm not 100% sure.
That might be an opportunity to maintain a property, or I don't know if that's a bad idea. I'm just suggesting that might be a way to make some revenue.
Mr. Ahern.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As I understand it, this article, it should be on our warrant every year. This is, as Selectman Patrice said, this should be on our warrant article every year, unless there's language that says this goes on in perpetuity. So this gives the people in Plymouth a chance to authorize the selectmen each year, and so nothing funny is going to happen without us knowing about it. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Is there any further discussion?
Mr. Moderator.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I just need to clarify that, Omer. That is not, the statute changed. I don't have it before me. I'm not sure of the year, just a few years ago, that we don't have to put this on every year. When we did it a few years ago, I'm guessing 6 to 10 years ago, we put it on. The statute changed shortly after that to allow us to do it not in perpetuity. If we add that to the language today, we could do that. But once in a while, you bring it up so that the people know you have this authority. It was not my understanding that it had to be done every year. We haven't done it every year as long as I can remember. It's been sporadic. Maybe it's done in the past. Maybe it was done when they needed to exercise it.
Is there any further discussion? That will bring us to the vote on Article 7, to see if the town will vote to grant authority to the Board of Selectmen allowed under RSA 41:14-A to acquire or sell land, building or both, provided, however, that they shall first submit any such proposed acquisition or sale to the Planning Board and Conservation Commission for review and recommendation, following which the Selectmen shall conduct 2 public hearings on any proposed acquisition or sale. This authority to sell property shall not apply to town-owned conservation land, town forest land, or real estate given to the town for charitable community purposes. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Article 7 passes. And as a answer to the question of how many registered voters, several minutes ago, and I keep missing this in between articles, we have 115 registered voters here a little slightly earlier tonight when this was passed to me. Article 8, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,354,502 for fiscal year 0809 general governmental expenses as follows. Salaries, fees, and expenses, Selectmen's Office, $340,160. Elections, registration, vital statistics, town clerk's office, $140,581. Financial administration, $178,390. Reappraisal of property, $54,000. Contract services, legal and others, $111,500. Personnel administration, $3,500. Planning and zoning, $118,057. Land use enforcement, $67,300. General government buildings, $63,150. Cemeteries, $50,069. Miscellaneous insurance, workers' compensation, liability, and unemployment, $148,150. Emergency management, $9,000. Care of trees, $2,400. Debt service, SRF, landfill closure, $67,245. Education and training expense, $1,000. Is there a motion?
Mr. Moderator, I'd like to move Article 8 as read.
Is there a second? It's been moved. Article 8 has been moved and seconded. Is there discussion? Mr. Ahern. Pardon? Thank you. Is there a budget committee here tonight? I appreciate that, Mr. Ahern.
The Budget Committee confers with the Selectmen's article on this, Article 8.
Thank you. Is there discussion? Mr. Wood.
Who is the personnel administrator?
Is there somebody at the front table who can address that?
Are you talking about Sexton?
No, I'm talking about personnel, administration, but who is the administrator? Who's the administrator? Who's getting paid the money?
Paul.
Or is that nothing?
That's not a salary.
Do you want to speak to that, Paul?
It's not a salary line. That line's for physicals, fitness, and COBRA reimbursements.
I didn't hear you, Paul.
That's a benefit line. That's not a salary line. That's for COBRA reimbursements and for physicals for personnel.
Okay, the next one is emergency management. Is that money we're putting away in case of an emergency, or is that salaries?
Yeah, 4,000 for salary and 5,000 for equipment.
Is there anything being raised in case there is an emergency that we can take it, or does that come out from some other place? In other words, if there's an emergency that costs the town $1 million, where do we get the money from? The state?
Insurance?
Insurance. Oh, okay. All right, I can't seem to find a line item of how much money we spent for care of trees. Or how much we have in the kitty. I know there's nothing in the kitty.
Do you understand the question? Okay. Is there somebody that wants to answer that? Okay.
Moderator, it's on page 112, line 4619, says care of trees.
You found that, Paul?
It's also on page 14 of your spreadsheet. $2,400.
It was how much?
$2,400.
That's what you spent?
Yep.
Okay, so this is just, so we won't be spending any more than that. It just seems that after this hard winter, there's going to be a lot of trees that are in sad shape and so forth, and I think that should be increased a little bit, that's all.
That's all we budgeted for at that time.
All right.
Mr. Ahern.
I've been scurrying trying to find it, and I can find the chart of payments, but I'm curious as to how much more money we owe on the landfill closure at this point in time.
Page 25.
Yeah, that just shows the original amount and how much we're owe each year, because it doesn't decrease. So that's why I'm wondering how much we still owe. It looks like the total we paid was $549,000.
That's the total that's still owed.
549 is what we still owe?
Yep.
Is any of that coming back from the state or any of the...
Right to the right, $114,391.
The interest amount?
The state gives us back that payment.
Okay, thank you.
Further discussion on Article 8? Seeing no discussion on further discussion, brings us to the vote on Article 8 to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,354,502 for FY 0809 general governmental expenses as follows: salaries, fees, and expenses, Selectmen's Office, $340,160. Election registration, vital statistics, Town Clerk's Office, $140,581. Financial administration, $178,390. Reappraisal of property, $54,000. Contract services, legal and others, $111,500. Personnel administration, $3,500. Planning and zoning, $118,057. Land use enforcement, $67,300. General government buildings, $63,150. Cemeteries, $50,069. Miscellaneous insurance, workers' comp, liability and unemployment, $148,150. Emergency management, $9,000. Care of trees, $2,400. Debt service SRF landfill closure, $67,245. Education and training expense, $1,000. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Article 8 passes.
Mr. Moderator, I move to restrict reconsideration of all previous articles.
It's been moved to reconstrict reconsideration of all previous articles. Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? There is no reconsideration for Articles 3 through 8. Article 9, the Board of Selectmen is hereby directed by the town's legislative body to immediately negotiate in good faith with Meredith Village Savings Bank, property leaseholder, and Willard H. Beckley Jr., property owner, to secure a quitclaim grant of easement for a public pedestrian walkway across the subject MVSP Beckley property, and subsequently finalize a railroad crossing certificate from New Hampshire Department of Transportation Railroad Division. The Board of Selectmen is further instructed to immediately establish a winter maintenance arrangement through a town department with either town laborers or through contracted services to properly maintain the North Green Street parking lot and areas around its parking ticket kiosk and the connecting walkway stairway to Main Street across Meredith Village Savings Bank Beckley property. The directed action will fulfill the terms and conditions of the public-private project collaborators as agreed upon by the previous Board of Selectmen in 2006-2007. Is there a motion? The article's been moved.
Second.
The article's been moved and seconded. Is there somebody to speak to the article?
Mr. Moderator?
Yes, Bill.
I'm Bill Hool. I'd like to brief the Assembly very briefly on the background to this petitioned warrant article, for which there were over 75 signatures that brought this petition forward. This is a project that was approved by town meeting 1 year ago, and which went forward immediately after town meeting into the construction phase by virtue of the fact that when we came to town meeting in March '07, we had bid specifications already prepared for part of the project that had to get underway immediately following town meeting, if town meeting supported the project, in order to get the construction completed within the right-of-way of the New Hampshire DOT Railroad, where part of the structures were going to be built. As background to this project, I just want to refresh for the Assembly's benefit what led up to the ultimate approval by town meeting of the project that has been now built out. The Board of Selectmen originally purchased the Pemmy Bridge House on Green Street with the express purpose in mind to build the parking lot that has recently been built, although it was not configured or defined at that time. In 2005, the planning board, when Meredith Village Savings Bank came forward with their proposal to develop the Beckley property for their bank structure, the planning board requested that they build a walkway connecting Main Street to their rear property line in anticipation of the construction of a parking lot on Green Street that the town had conceptualized and was in the process of working through some details on. In 2006, the TIF District Advisory Board that this Assembly had approved in years prior for the purposes of economic development of the Village District undertook this project to give it more definition and determination of how we might approach the build out of the project. In that time frame, the Main Street Plymouth Inc. worked with the TIF district in conceptualizing the walkway and the parking lot project. Later in 2006, the Board of Selectmen, seated at the time, appropriated $2,500 for the preliminary design of this project. In 2006, subsequent to that appropriation, White Mountain Gateway Economic Development Corporation provided a matching $2,500 amount to enable the advisory board to hire the Capital Region Development Corporation to assist us in making some revisions to the TIF district to encompass that development site. In 2007, in January, the Board of Selectmen signed a memorandum of agreement with Meredith Village Savings Bank to form a public-private partnership to undertake this walkway parking lot project. As part of that collaboration partnership agreement, Meredith Village Savings Bank promised to contribute $30,000 towards the project and also grant to the town a public pedestrian easement across the Beckley property to be able to access the parking facility directly from Main Street. They additionally agreed with the Board of Selectmen to provide $18,000 of front money to complete the detailed design of the walkway project so that we could have hard bids with specifications as the basis for those bids before last town meeting. And we did, in fact, bring those hard cost figures to you last meeting. The New Hampshire DOT, specifically the Rail Division, in January of 2007, approved the design that had been developed by an engineer for the town, and approved the building of the stairway and the retaining wall in the New Hampshire DOT right-of-way. It was conditioned upon the signing of a pedestrian walkway easement between the town and the Meredith Village Savings Bank and the Beckley Trust. In 2007, in January, also, Main Street Plymouth Inc. Board of Directors agreed to commit to fundraising $17,000 to $19,000 to build a canopy over the proposed stairway that transitions from the upper level to the lower level of the parking lot. Additionally, in February, the McLean Realty Corporation and the town signed a memorandum of agreement to do a boundary line adjustment between the McLean property and the town's property acquired when they took the Penny Bridge House property. New Hampshire DOT also agreed in March of 2007 to a property swap to facilitate the parking lot constructed as configured in the design that was detailed and that they given approval to. Now, in order for the Rail Division to have cooperated with the town in allowing us to build the structures that we did in their right-of-way, it was also a requirement that they grant to the town a certificate of crossing for pedestrians at that railway location where the structures were to be built. And again, that was based on DOT policies, a requirement for an easement on abutting private property to facilitate that crossing. That's the background, and here's the dilemma. As you well know, I was the chair of the TIF advisory board that spearheaded this project with the collaborators. I therefore, at the request of the preceding board, was coordinating much of the activities that were being conducted to prepare for the actual build-out of the two-phased project. When we got to the stage of where the first phase had been built out, that being the walkway and the stairway, the project that involved Meredith Village Savings Bank was effectively completed. And therefore, on May 30th of this year, 2007, they submitted through me to the Board of Selectmen a draft easement proposition that the Board of Selectmen and the Town Council was to take a look at and to screen it for any concerns that either the Board of Selectmen or Town Council may have had. I conveyed that document to the Town Council, or to the Board of Selectmen on June 18th on behalf of the Meredith Village Savings Bank for them to make those determinations. Subsequent to that June 18th delivery, I was separated from working any further on the project. And the understanding that I was given by the Board of Selectmen at the time that we met on June 18th was that they would handle whatever remained to be done and would follow through on this particular document that I had delivered to them and negotiate any issues that they may have had with it. Time then progressed to December. And come December, we had our first early snowfall. And that facility was not being maintained for pedestrian passage. It was not being maintained in the sense that while the parking lot itself was being plowed, the snow was not being removed for patrons of that parking lot to access the kiosk where they buy their parking ticket, much less the stairway crossing and walkway across the Meredith Village Savings Bank was not being cleared either, except for that which Meredith Village itself was clearing on its property. When I made inquiry into this situation to find out where the easement stood, I was told that the board had not acted on it, that the document had been shelved, and no actions had been taken to finalize the easement agreement that Meredith Village had agreed to give to the town and the town wanted in order to provide public pedestrian crossing. A copy of that same agreement went to the DOT